With milk prices dropping for a fourth straight year, dairy farmers are feeling the pinch, and many small family farms are struggling to survive.
How many people could take a 30 or 40% pay cut?
Everybody's hurting in our industry.
They are losing money each and every day.
This week, we bring together farmers, political leaders, and our community to address what's needed to keep family farms here in the North Country in business.
Our farmers cannot afford to wait any longer. This is a real crisis.
Next, on a special edition of Mountain Lake Journal.
Mountain Lake Journal on Mountain Lake PBS is made possible in part by
Northern Insuring, guiding your way for 85 years with offices in Plattsburgh, Whitehall, and Messina, providing personal insurance, business insurance, and life and employee benefits services.
Northfind Utilities creates employment and training opportunities for North Country residents with projects that build community and social infrastructure. We're family-focused and education-oriented. Power is our business and pride is our choice.
Knight Automotive, featuring a full selection of the entire Buick lineup in stock, and our world-class rated General Motors technician, Terry Relation, with 40 years of experience. Knight Automotive, Route 3, Plattsburgh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special hour-long edition of Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, we're hosting one of our town hall-style community forums with a panel of guests and studio audience. Our topic this week, dairy farms in crisis. For nearly 4 years, milk prices have been falling in the grocery store and down on the farm where it's made. In fact, the price farmers get for their milk today is about the same that they were getting paid in the late 80s and 90s. Think about that for a moment. Imagine if you were still getting paid what you made some 30 or even 40 years ago. And while prices are low, the cost of producing that milk, what the farmer pays out for feed, fuel, farm equipment, utilities, and labor, all keep going up. It simply costs many farmers more these days to make the milk than what they're getting paid. And after years of losing money and in the red month after month, many family farms are at the breaking point. The price farmers in the North Country get for their milk has dropped significantly since 2014. What used to be $24 per 100 pounds has fallen to $16. And farmers like Todd Giroux says that doesn't even come close to covering the labor and equipment that it costs to produce it.
So the fact that we are around the $15, $16 range and it's costing us $17 or $18 to make that milk, we're taking a hit right off the bat.
How many people could take a 30 or 40% pay cut and continue their lives with the same cost of living and go on for an indefinite period of time? This has gone on for so long that it's gotten to the point where we can't even afford to get out.
Those who are getting out, in many cases, are selling their herds and equipment at a loss.
So I've been there, I've seen cows get sold, and it's not a pleasant feeling. Just your whole life, everything you love is gone.
And when farmers struggle, it also takes a toll on local businesses who sell farmers equipment and supplies.
And if we do not have the income to do that, not only do our animals and our farms suffer, but our local businesses suffer. So it's very much a rippling effect. And in turn, these local businesses aren't spending their money in the community.
Rob Dupree owns a farm supply store in Chazy.
It definitely affects us, financially as well. If most people went to work and their boss told them, well, today you're making 20% less, they get up and walk out the door. And it happens to these guys continuously.
With times so tough, many worry if their kids will be able to follow in their footsteps.
If dairy farming is their dream, I don't want their dream to turn into a nightmare.
I just don't want to see any more people going out. There's good family farms that are struggling to make ends meet.
Joining us are two of the farmers you just met. Todd Giroux is a dairy farmer from Beekmantown, New York, who also happens to be president of the Farm Bureau in Clinton County. Next to him is Eric Ooms, who operates a 400-cow dairy farm in Chatham, New York. Eric also sits on the New York Farm Bureau Board of Directors. and Ashley Brunell, who with her husband Drew runs his family's 150-year-old dairy farm in Chazy, New York. And Bob Wellington is a senior vice president and economist with Agri-Mark, the cooperative that buys milk from about 1,000 farmers in northern New York, Vermont, and throughout New England. Agri-Mark owns the Cabot Cheese Company in Chateaugay, New York, and Cabot Cheese in Vermont. Welcome to you all. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Most of our viewers tuning in aren't farmers and they didn't grow up on a farm, so they most likely don't have any idea what farmers get paid for their milk or how much that price fluctuates from month to month and year to year. They see the price in the grocery store, which is about $3, $3.50, depending on what store you go to. Give us an idea, if you would, of that $3 or $3.50, how much of that does the farmer get?
Pennies, really. It's we get paid by the hundredweight, so it's not by the gallon or half gallon like you see in the store. So
when you talk 100 weight, that's about 11.5 gallons of milk. And the price isn't the same. It varies. And it can vary quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of the problem.
Big part of the problem. Back in 2014, we were getting $24 to $25 100 pounds of milk. And right now we're looking at $14.88 for this month is the starting price. So a big difference.
Does it vary month to month?
It varies month to month. Depends on the commodity markets. A lot of different factors in on the price of milk.
And we often hear that milk prices, how milk prices are set here in the Northeast and across the country is complex. Everyone says it's complex. The federal government determines the prices, and is it primarily based on supply and demand, Bob?
Primarily, yes, but unfortunately it's becoming more and more supply and demand both nationally and internationally. So there's almost no control and reaction to what's happening here in New York State or the Northeast.
So it's worldwide. What's happening worldwide affects the prices here.
Yes, because farmers have been very aggressive about selling their products, and about 15% of their milk goes into dairy products that are sold internationally. So that has a big impact. And those prices collapse, that carries right through to their farm prices, unfortunately.
This is relatively new because about 10, 12 years ago, we would export 4% of our product. Historically, we did not export as much as we do now. So while 2014 was a great year, everything was kind of going our way. And then a couple things have happened internationally since then. The European Union has taken off their quotas that they had for, 30, 40 years, Bob?
Yes.
And Europe was primed. I didn't think they could make more milk, but they have.
In the past, one of the ways to use up excess milk was to put it into powder and butter, because those could be stored. Butter could be frozen and stored for a year or two. Powder could be in a dry storage and stored for several years. Unfortunately, when the support program disappeared on that a couple decades ago, the prices in the international markets have collapsed now because Europeans are making so much powder, and countries like China, which sometimes gets into the market and buys hundreds of millions of pounds of product, suddenly decided they weren't going to buy as much. So today, the current price of powder is about where it was 50 years ago. And so it's unbelievably low, and it translates right back into lower farm prices.
So with the increased production in Europe and that, how much has exports dropped off for farmers here in the U.S.?
Well, we've worked very hard on that, try to keep our exports up. So we've been able to keep 15%, but the only way we can do that is to match their lower prices. So we drive those prices down. If we didn't match them, then that excess milk would build up into this country, and so it would lower our prices anyway. So we've been able to match it. We have a very assertive dairy farming industry. Our farmers contribute 15 cents a hundredweight into promotion. They do a lot of activities to help sell their products. It just has not been enough in the last several years.
Have there been other factors that have led to the oversupply or the glut globally?
Well, yeah, I mean, primarily it's both a combination of increased milk production. Canada, for example, has changed their policies. They're now producing more. On top of that, Europe is producing more. There's been some growth, particularly out west. We had huge growth in the last 2 or 3 decades in California.
Are we seeing a drop-off in consumption here in the U.S.? Is that adding to this at all?
It depends on the type of products. We are seeing some falling in production steadily in fresh drinking milk. And although one type that's growing is whole milk. which is a surprise for everybody. They're saying that the whole milk is actually better for you, and of course it tastes better. Fat carries flavors in dairy products, so that's been growing. But the whole beverage milk category has been declining. Greek yogurt went up dramatically. It's stable right now, but we've had really good growth in cheese. We've had really good growth in butter. We've seen the macadam and Cabot cheese businesses expand dramatically, and the same thing we've seen our Cabot butter sales grow. So people are eating more of those products, but some of the basic commodities are eating less of.
We hear from a number of health experts now that are saying drink whole milk and eat butter again. And so are you seeing that? Is that translating into more business for farmers?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really helping our sales. As a farmer cooperative, 100% of our profits go back to our farmer owners. So anytime you want to buy a pound of our butter, you know that the money goes back to farmers directly.
So the price of milk is controlled by the Federal Milk Market Order System.
Yes.
What is that?
Good question.
Well, I happen to sort of be an expert in that because I spent 11 years with USDA at the beginning of my career in that agency. And so what that deals with, it started in 1937 during the Depression when farmers couldn't get a decent price for milk. So that's when they decided that the government would set minimum prices primarily for fresh drinking milk to make sure consumers could get it. But eventually it was for all the different types of milk. So now there's 4 different milk prices, whether it's used for fresh drinking milk, yogurt and ice cream, cheese, or butter and non-fat dry milk powder. And farmers get a weighted average of the two. And they determine these prices by where the market price is at. They look at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, where they do a lot of commodity pricing. They do a survey based on that, and they find out what the price of the commodity is for that month, and they translate that into a price of milk. So when that commodity price for cheese or non-fat dry milk, which is our problem, goes down, then that automatically goes into the formulas, and farmers get a price, like was mentioned, $14.88, I believe, one of the lowest prices they've seen in a long time. That's about $1.25 a gallon.
So a lot of people would say this is an antiquated system, and they've been saying that for years.
It's not. It is complicated, but the orders do a couple things really, really well. Okay, because the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is too low, that's why we're all having trouble paying our bills. But it guarantees that our milk is pooled together, and we generally get the same price. There's some differentials for hauling, depending on how far your truck has to go to the plant. But it guarantees that whether it be Todd or my brother in Malone or Ashley, we all get roughly the same price. And so that's one of the real positives of the federal order system. Yes, it's old, but that's one of the positives of that system. And it's complicated, and it's not giving us the answer we want right now, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
Ashley, what's been the impact for you and Drew on your farm?
Obviously the prices, but we're lucky enough where we don't have labor. We don't have to pay other people to work for us. We do all the work ourselves. So we can keep our costs down as much as we can, but we would still like more.
And Todd, Ashley, we heard from you a little bit earlier in the program. You're losing money every single shipment of milk. It's costing you more to produce the milk than the price you're getting for it.
Oh yeah, it's eating away at our equity, what we have built up in our farms. It's money you'll never get back. So that's the part that hurts the most.
And the question, how long can you keep doing that?
The question is, how long can you justify that? You're borrowing against your equity that you've had in your farm from the good years. And so in these types of years, you're eating into that. And some people are at a point where the bank says, no, can't do it anymore.
Have we seen an increase in the last few weeks or months of the number of farms going out of business?
Yeah, we have over the last several months. Probably over the last year, it's progressing. I mean, we've probably lost, since the beginning of the cycle 4 years ago, we're down over 200 farms. So we had over 1,200, now we're down to 1,000 on it. It tends to be small to medium-sized farms. And so they're very family-oriented farms, and they don't have the cash flow or the savings or the ability to borrow that other farms have.
So how are you able to stay in business? How are you able to do this when you're losing money?
Our farm, we've diversified a little bit. We sell sweet corn on the side of the road. We sell fence posts. We, at the end of the year, try to sell some shell corn to neighboring farms and stuff like that, so we don't have to milk more cows, so we don't rely on just the one income. So that's how we are able to do it. Not everybody's able to do that. Not everybody has the land base, the time, the help. So that's the challenge. It's finding your own way to get through it.
We see a lot of farms diversifying like that, selling maple, selling eggs, selling cheese. Do most of your neighbors do that? Is that helping them supplement their losses?
Again, it's to an extent. It all depends, again, whether the help's there, whether the land's there. It's just a tough one.
Do you see light at the end of the tunnel right now?
We're the eternal optimists. We have to, or else we wouldn't do it every day. So it has to get better, like Eric said. It just has to.
But you're also trying to take steps to rectify things. You, as a Farm Bureau president, you've reached out to lawmakers in Albany. You've reached out to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik and others. And what are you asking them to do?
We're just asking them to take a look at the situation and listen to their constituents, listen to the problems, and work with us to fix the problems.
One of the things that I know from a New York Farm Bureau perspective, and we basically do what our delegates at the grassroots level tell us, is we were very happy to see in the recent budget deal that was passed in the Congress about, maybe a month ago, they did dramatically increase the two of the potential insurance programs for dairy. Mm-hmm. One is the MPP, which is the Margin Price Protection, right, Bob?
Margin Protection Program.
Margin Protection Program, and then the other one is a LGM for dairy, which is Livestock Growth Margin. The MPP program has been, I'll be nice and say it's been a failure, but the changes that were made that we advocated for and the congressional leaders were able to come up with will hopefully, it will provide some, if people choose to buy into it, it will provide some cash back for farmers. Is it going to be enough to fix the current problem? No. Will it be helpful? Yes.
Back in 2014, when the Farm Bill passed, they said MPP is going to be the safety net that the farmers need, but it hasn't worked.
No. They changed it at the last minute. Because of budget issues, they changed the formula. So they knocked off between $1 and $1.50 a hundredweight, which is a huge amount of money on the margin protection. So you thought you were buying in on a level of protection that turned out to be a lot lower than it actually was. So in 2015, it's like your house burned down, and they said, yeah, but only half of it burned down, and it wasn't the half that we covered. Okay, I mean, it sounds silly, but hardly anybody got any money despite collapsing prices, and we have to have that fixed.
So the hope is in this bipartisan budget deal and in the 2018 Farm Bill that work has started on that it's going to be fixed.
We're very optimistic. We have very strong supporters, and particularly Vermont's Pat Leahy has been a leader, and this has always been a leader in dairy policy. We have, of course, the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, who's done a lot of work on this. So we have some really strong advocates. Unfortunately, the current Congress doesn't have as much reaction to the minority party that's in place right now. So they can't get as much done as I think they would like to get done.
It is an election year, midterm elections. Do you think there could be a push to try to get the Farm Bill done before that?
We hope so.
Well, there's actually, you can be optimistic about potentially getting a Farm Bill this year because it's one of the least contentious things that Washington's dealing with because they're not having very good luck on anything else. And this is, Farm Bills are not usually partisan, they tend to be regional. And that's one of the positive things that we have had some good with Senator Gillibrand on the Ag Committee. We have two members from New York on the House Ag Committee. Years ago, we didn't have anybody. There's like two north of the Mason-Dixon line out of 65 on the Ag Committee.
We're taping earlier in the week. We received word that Senator Gillibrand is going to introduce legislation that's going to have a piece to go in tandem with the margin protection program, and we don't really know exactly what it's going to look like, but Bob, what do you envision it could possibly be?
Well, it looks like it's trying to do some kind of support price level to give some minimal level back to farmers, which is what we had for decades. And so that's more of an expensive program. It's tough to get politically, but it could help address the problem. So we have to wait and see if we can generate enough support in Congress to do it. But it could be a longer-term solution. It just could be an expensive one. That's the issue.
Another safety net.
Yes, absolutely.
State lawmakers, Senator Little, Assemblyman Jones, are there things they can do to help out on a state level? Or is it primarily you've got to fix the milk
Absolutely.
pricing?
There are state things that can be done, particularly with the regulations that farmers have to face. We have to make sure that they're fair and reasonable, because that adds a lot to the cost. But we also, we operate in all 6 New England states, and the states of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine have state programs that have returned between $1 and $3 a hundredweight back to farmers to keep them in business. And those states are under particular pressure. And they've been able to maintain their farm numbers because the states have stepped in and said, these farmers provide a lot more than just milk to our communities.
This past weekend, State Senator Betty Little and Assemblyman Jones met with members of organized labor in Plattsburgh, and we asked them about the plight of dairy farmers right now with milk prices so low.
The milk pricing situation right now is it's pathetic and it's ridiculous what our farmers are getting on their price per hundred. I was talking to a farmer the other day that his latest paycheck was $14.48. We were getting the farmers were getting those prices 40 years ago. This is a real crisis, and whether it be through measures of production control, which a lot of people don't like that either, or some kind of quota system, we need to help our farmers out, no matter what it be. But we need to have that conversation to help them.
We're going to work with them and try to see what we can do. The price also includes transportation, getting them, and it shouldn't, nor should it include their energy costs. It's supposed to be included in some of this as well. If we could take those things out and have those aside or added on, that would be helpful. But so far we have not been able to do that. So we're looking to the federal government really to come up with a program and then help where we can on the state level.
Todd, you've had meetings with all 3 of the lawmakers,
Yep.
Assemblyman Jones, Senator Little, and Congresswoman Stefanik.
Yep.
You were in Albany just this past week.
Last Monday.
Are they taking some steps, like Bob mentioned, that may help you through this crisis?
They're talking about it. The conversation started. We have to keep after them to keep the conversation rolling and to keep pressure on them so they know it's real and that it's urgent. We'll see where it goes.
We did invite both Senator Little and Assemblyman Jones. Both said they wish they could be here, but with the legislature in session, they're in Albany this week. We also invited North Country Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who could not attend because Congress is also in session this week in Washington. But she did send a statement saying she understands the challenges faced by farm families and that her top priorities are to address the low price of milk and the failed margin protection program, the agriculture labor crisis, and the need to increase export opportunities for North Country ag product. You can read the Congresswoman's full statement on our website at mountainlake.org. Congresswoman Stefanik, are you hopeful that she might help you more by having more of a direct impact on the farm bill?
We hope so. I mean, she's there. She's running the halls. She's working on it.
What has she told you? You've had conversations with her.
She's very concerned about our area and our situation. She's looking for information. She'd like to have a meeting like this and sit down with a bunch of farmers and talk it through. We all know what Washington's like. She's doing everything she can. We have to see where that can go.
And now let's turn to members of our audience. Tony LaPierre, thank you very much for being here with us. You are a farmer here in Clinton County.
Yes, I am. I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer. I farm in Chazy. We milk about 500 cows over there. One of the concerns I have as being a dairy farmer is the cost of doing business in New York State on a state level. Some of the things that farmers have to deal with in New York State we have to operate at a much higher level. Labor costs, minimum wage are that much higher. Not to say that we pay way above minimum wage, but just the fact that before too long we're going to be up to $12.50 for minimum wage, and Pennsylvania is still barely over $7.50. The scale of not just necessarily being minimum, but all our other workers, we employ 8 full-time people and 4 to 5 part-time people.
Will this affect the number of employees you have? How are you going to absorb the higher costs, or are you going to have to look at cutting back on the number of hired hands that you have?
What we would like to do is invest in different technologies that are out there that would maybe help us be a little more efficient, so maybe we could reduce some of our labor that way, but in order to do that, you need money to do that. So we would love to, at some point, if we could see the market stabilize, where the price raises back up, then we could look at those investments a little closer and hopefully invest in that technology and try to get ahead of it, so that maybe that would be a way to increase income.
So for now, though, you can't cut back on your workers. You're going to have to absorb those costs then.
Correct.
And with milk prices the way they are, it just makes the situation all the worse.
That's correct, yeah.
We're going to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the concern over the toll these low milk prices may be taking and the financial stress that's being put on farmers. Also, the unusual step one of the co-ops, Agri-Mark, took to address it. It was in this letter that was mailed out to dairy farmers last month, and we'll tell you what was included in the letter that raised many eyebrows. That when we continue.
Imagine dining out at a new restaurant every month, all year long, and benefiting Mountain Lake PBS at the same time. Our Dinner of the Month raffle gives you a chance to win 12 gift certificates of $100 apiece. With a different raffle on each side of the border, you can try out 12 new restaurants in New York State or in Quebec. Tickets are $25 apiece, and there are only 200 available for each raffle. Learn more or get your tickets today at mountainlake.org.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're tuning in for New York Now, you can watch it at special times this week on Sunday at 4:30 a.m. and again at 11 a.m. We are hosting a special hour-long edition of Mountain Lake Journal this week, a community forum on how low milk prices are threatening many small family dairy farms here in the North Country. As dairy farmers struggle through their 4th year of depressed milk prices, there are growing concerns that many farmers may be at risk of becoming depressed themselves. The outlook for milk prices for the next year, as we've been discussing, is so bleak, it's heightening worries about farmer suicides, which is why Agri-Mark took the unusual step a month ago of sending this letter along with the farmers' milk checks. Donald Pouliot, who has worked his dairy farm in Westford, Vermont for 44 years, says the dairy industry today is much different than when he started.
When I grew up in Westford, there were probably 100 farms that ship milk.
Now he's the only farmer in Westford who is still milking.
Right now, with the economic times the way they are, it's as good as it can be.
Pouliot belongs to the Agri-Mark Co-op. When the company paid its farmers in January, the check included a letter that listed crisis hotlines for organizations that can help farmers who are feeling financial stress, depression, or having thoughts of suicide.
And it was kind of shocking at first, but the more and more I think about it, the shocking thing is the reason they felt they had to write it, because the economic times are so rough.
The co-op says it is a real concern.
Unfortunately, it is, because there is so much stress on the farm. You know, milk prices for 2018 are expected to be lower than they were the last few previous years.
Doug Demento, who is the corporate communications director for Agri-Mark, says they've heard varying opinions from the 1,000 farmers who are part of the co-op, but he says they stand by the decision to send it because of the financial stress that for several farmers was too much to bear.
We're trying to be proactive, trying to get out ahead of it. And if there's just one person or one family who can help start the discussion and prevent one bad event or a catastrophe on the farm, then we feel it was worth it sending the letter out.
Bob, you wrote that letter?
Yes, I did. There was great concern from our farmer board of directors as well as our management. We had seen several suicides in the Northeast, not just our members, but other farmers. We saw the level of stress that farmers were facing, and we wanted to let the farmers know there are options out there particularly on all kinds of stress hotlines available to farmers.
Was Mr. Pouliot's reaction typical for dairy farmers?
Yes, some were upset because they felt like we sent them a letter that they didn't need. We assumed that they were under stress or they had issues. But when it was explained to them that we had farmers who were under stress, that had concerns about these things, and if this could help even a few farmers, it was worth doing. Most farmers care about their neighbors. And so they said, yeah, it was the right thing to do. And it also led to a lot of discussions within farm families about the stress that they're facing. And it also let legislators know, and the community and reporters and others know just how bad the problem was. People talk about it, but they don't recognize how bad it is until a situation like this occurs.
Ashley, what did you and Drew think when you opened your January milk check and you found that letter?
We were surprised. We thought it was crazy that prices are so low that Agri-Mark needed to send out that letter. We kind of got it as a slap in the face with, sorry Bob, but with the price forecast on the back.
Because right on the back it had the price forecast for 2018.
It wasn't intended to be in the same letter, but it just worked out that way.
It did. So what did you, when you saw that, what went through your mind?
It was kind of, I don't know, hurt a little bit that we chose to start up the farm again and thought we could make it work, and then we're looking at prices like this that we never budgeted for or thought this would even happen. So it was kind of devastating. But
so the farm's been in Drew's family for 150 years, but you, as a young husband and wife, had just started up the farm again recently?
Yep.
How recently?
In 2012. His father and uncle sold out in '95, and they started a beef farm after that, Drew and his dad, and just recently in 2012 we started milking again.
So after a couple of years you were seeing good milk prices in 2014, but since then it's been tough. Have you heard of farmers who are almost to the breaking point emotionally and that they could be pushed to suicide?
I don't think pushed to suicide, but I feel like a lot of people will sell out if prices continue to be this low.
Bob, the letter was blunt, and that was the whole idea, to get people's attention.
Well, it was, but keep in mind, there was one small section that dealt with suicide on farm. Most of it dealt with the financial, personal stress and other issues, because there are tremendous hotlines in New York State, Vermont, and elsewhere that people can call. They can get financial help. They can have counselors they can talk to about these things. Mm-hmm. They can help with family issues with the stress. That was the main part of what we were trying to do. But at the end, it said there's also these numbers, because we had faced that. And that's the scariest thing. I've had friends that I know, even recently, who were farmers that decided not to stay around. And that's really difficult.
Have you seen an increase in the number of suicides?
We've seen a steady amount every few months of some farmer going out. And like I said, it's not just ours, it's all throughout the East. We've seen them in New York, we've seen them in Maine, we've seen them in Vermont, we've seen them in Connecticut, we've seen them all over. I can't really talk about any of the issues, and I certainly wouldn't do that, but we've seen enough of it that it worries us. But more, it's the stress. It's the absolute stress. Plus, keep in mind, at the end of January, December and January were terrible weather months. So we had tremendous stress on the farm from the weather. And that's what we're saying, oh, you're facing all that, and then you're facing these prices. The forecasts I put out were meant for the letter from a week before. And so we threw in the other piece later on, like the board said, we got to get it in right away. So we did. My mistake was, I should have said, well, if I'm going to put this in, I'm not going to give them the news on the forecast. I'll give it to them in 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we send out a check letter. It's just that we have a reputation of getting farmers to know what's happening in the marketplace as soon as we know. And that led us in that direction.
Do you think it was a mistake? I mean, would you do it again?
No, I definitely would do it again. I think what I would do is I would probably take the price forecast and put that off. And I would mention that prices, we're struggling with prices, because in reality, the next check letter had prices starting to inch their way up. We had some recovery started. And the last forecast we put up are better than before. Not dramatically different, but they're not. The lowest price point was that point in time.
So, you mentioned in the letter that Agri-Mark is in the process of implementing a free comprehensive member assistance program. And
Yes.
that when the letter was sent, the co-op was still in the process of getting that service
Yes.
up and running. When do you think you'll be able to start offering
We're
that?
going to announce that in April at our annual meeting. And in fact, it was at our board of directors meeting that we had some experts come in to tell us about designing that. And when everyone heard what had happened, that's when they said it has to go out tomorrow.
And as you mentioned, though, you listed for all the states.
Yes.
In New York, FarmNet, which
Yes.
is based at Cornell University,
Yes, great program.
provides both mental health counseling, but
Yes.
also financial
Yes,
counseling,
absolutely.
so that farmers can turn and get some assistance there, not just if they're at the breaking point and stressed out, but they can call and get some financial planning assistance as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And they have people all over the area.
Yes.
They provide counselors statewide.
Yep.
That's one of the issues that our state legislators like Billy Jones and Betty Little can work on, because FarmNet is constantly short on money. The governor's budget had them about half of the money that they were last year. They're probably going to be doing double the work this year. So that's one of those issues where state legislators can make a difference. But in our family, I work with my two brothers and my dad, and it was kind of a mixed discussion, but it got everybody talking. And I think that's kind of the value of a letter like that sometimes, is because you have no idea what's going on with the person next to you. And if it just helps people to talk about it and be aware of it, that to me is a victory. And so, I mean, we have these things out there, and like FarmNet is a great program. They have professionals in Ithaca, but they have counselors of sorts all over the state. And they work in teams, you know, depending on what's needed. And it's just a great opportunity for farmers to talk through what do we do going forward? And maybe you don't change anything, but the reality is you need to talk about this stuff sometimes, and that's hard.
With somebody that can talk back. That's
Right.
the kicker. Yeah, and a lot of the times when we do see somebody, it's another farmer. So it's not necessarily woe is me, but everybody's head is a little lower right now. Nobody's doing good. Nobody's having fun. So just a different outlet to be able to get your emotions out cannot be a bad thing. So.
One of the farmer suicides that became a national story, Eric, was one down close to you in Columbia County several years ago, about 8 years ago, and that was one where a farmer took his own life, but also took the life of every one of his milkers in his herd. When that happened, what impact did that have on farmers in your area in that county?
It's just kind of a wake-up call that you don't know what's happening with the person sitting next to you. Because in coming here tonight, I was very conflicted because, I love talking about what we do and all those types of things. But right now, I mean, Todd and I saw each other last week. Did we talk about the milk price? We don't want to talk about the milk price because what are we going to do? We do that, and like Bob said, the letter was the worst time from the perspective of when it's wicked cold out, and I'm usually 20 degrees warmer to the south here. But when it's wicked cold out, you're just happy to be done at the end of the day, and hopefully the cows were milked and fed. And you go home and you sleep and you start all over again the next day. And then that kind of says, yep, reality. You still have other issues, but just awareness is awareness. There's value in that, just so people know they're not alone. It doesn't fix anything, but hopefully it helps somebody.
Farmers get their milk checks twice a month, and we always include a milk check letter to tell them what's happening in the marketplace. Usually once a month or every 6 weeks is a price forecast so they know where the market's going. And we talk about other things that are happening in the marketplace. So this was not an atypical fact that we had a letter in there. It was an atypical letter without a doubt, but it's something that we normally do because it's the one communication that we have. About 90% of our farmers say they read their check letter because their money comes with it. So we know they're going to read it, and so that's why we try to save our most important information for that communication.
And without that letter, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, to be honest with you. Not that it still wouldn't be good out or the prices wouldn't have rebounded, but that letter just in our area started our conversation. We sat down, we were going to write a letter. We were going to send it to Lee Stefanik. We were going to send it to Billy Jones and Betty Little. That instead turned into a press conference, which in turn turned into us sitting here. So I'll stand by Agri-Mark for sending out that letter any and every day. Did I like the way it was sent out either? Not necessarily, but if it helps one person, it was totally worth it, and it got us here, and it's got the conversation going, and that's what we need.
You mentioned about the press conference that you folks held. That was kind of probably the first time you've ever gathered as farmers all together and held a press conference, but actually you felt it was important to get the word out to people. I think people have heard and understand that dairy farmers have a tough go of it and have been struggling, but it was really important to get this message out.
Mm-hmm. After the budget bill was approved, and Senator Leahy was a major factor in getting changes in the margin protection program that Eric talked about. I had a press conference with him up in northern Vermont, and he told me at the press conference that he had received a copy of the letter and that he had shared it with several dozen of his other senators, and that it helped in his discussions. And they were all shocked, and when they called back to their states, they saw that their farmers were suffering as well. So it opened up that level of discussion as well.
Todd, also at that press conference that you folks held, you talked about how this doesn't just impact dairy farmers. This goes beyond, because if you folks are hurting, then others in the community are hurting, others who you do business with. Explain that, if you would.
Well, the ag dollar gets turned around in the community 4 or 5 times. You know, we pay our employees, we pay our vendors, we pay the equipment dealers. You know, it doesn't stop. We don't get to keep the money. We are asset rich, but generally it's dollar poor in the pocket. So, but no, that money turns in the communities and multiplies there. People pay their employees, they buy food. It grows and grows exponentially.
So this really has a ripple effect.
Big time.
And you can see it. You can see it in Clinton County, Ashley. You can. Yeah. You talk to neighbors and you know people who are impacted because milk prices are what they are.
Yep. It's even tougher for the guy who comes and brings you your soap or whatever it is you need for your farm. It's even harder for them because they get to hear everybody's stories, but they kind of have to collect the money, but that's not easy because you know they don't have it, because if they had it, they'd pay you. I mean, yeah, you have some credit risks that are probably always part of any business, but then you've got people who've never been a problem, and now they're, I'll pay you. Today's the 12th. Can you hold it till the 20th? Because the 20th when the milk check comes.
And one of those vendors joins us now. Rob Dupree owns a feed supply store in Chazy, New York. Yep. We appreciate you being here. You're feeling the impact. We saw you at the news conference with the farmers that day, and you talked about how this certainly has a ripple effect. You feel it.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, when farmers are feeling the pinch, we all feel the pinch. We're doing everything we can as a business to work with them. When you're getting paid below cost, it's impossible to pay your bills. So we're very fortunate. The majority of our customers are excellent. We stay in contact with them, and they work with us, and in turn we work with them. But it affects your receivables and your cash flow too. So you got to definitely get creative sometimes with how you pay bills yourself. But you make it work.
Has it impacted your business where you've had to do anything with your employees, or?
No, not to that point. We're in the same boat they are. What we do is very labor intensive. So for me to back off on employees it hurt my business as well.
You have a garden supply store as well, so you have other customers. You're diversified where you can.
Yeah, I'm fortunate from the standpoint that we've diversified enough over the years that that part of the business can help carry, in tough times, carry the other end. Over the years, the investments I've made in our business have been on that end to help. It's not necessarily the direction, my heart is in agriculture and farming, but as a business person, you got to look at what makes you money and what direction you got to go as a business. But yeah, we're fortunate enough we can get away from that to help carry, keep the cash flow coming in and keep things rolling.
And you mentioned you've worked on dairy farms before, and so you obviously feel for what the farmers are going through.
There's no question. I mean, we deal. I know a lot of these guys personally. We've dealt with them for a long time, and really you build a relationship with these people. And when you talk to them and you see them struggling, it bothers you. You know what I mean? It's not just a customer owner relationship. It's a partnership more than anything, and it's tough to watch them struggle like that.
Rob, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Gary Douglas is here from the Chamber of Commerce. Nice to see you.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this. There's ample reason why everybody in the North Country should care about this. First of all, because it's about our friends and neighbors. Also, it's certainly about product that we tend to take for granted but would miss if that milk wasn't there for our cereal in the morning, but if in particular Cabot Cheese wasn't there for all of us to enjoy as a product made here in the North Country in Chateaugay and enjoyed by all of us. But I also wanted to stress the rest of the enormous economic impact that Todd touched on it in terms of the multiplier effect that dairy has on the area. And in two regards, I wanted to first of all invite perhaps Bob to put some numbers on the impact of dairy, because I think most people would be astounded to know what the economic impact in the community is of an average dairy farm, that if that wasn't there tomorrow, the amount of money that wouldn't be cycling through our community. But then secondly, I also wanted to note something that's important to think about, which is the enormous economic value to us here in the North Country of the rural landscape. We had a visitor here from Canada today. And one of the things that we all hear about is workforce recruitment, workforce retention. One of the things we have going for us, certainly here in this area, is that quality of life. An essential part of the quality of life here in the North Country is the rural landscape. Going out to the orchards in Peru, going out to the farm stores, just enjoying those beautiful rolling hills in Peru and Beekmantown and Chazy. It's part of the environment that makes this a conducive area to retain people and to attract people that we would greatly miss. Very hard to quantify. But I think if we think about it, we can realize how important it is to keep these farms going so that we continue to have that rural landscape.
Thank you. Bob, the average farm really has a huge...
There's been studies that an average cow generates almost $13,000 a year in economic activity. So a 100-cow operation is $1.3 million. If you have a 400-cow operation, it's over $5 million into the community. So they really start to build up. In the North Country alone, it's $1 billion industry multiple.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to
I think
to
they
hear
would,
that.
but there's a lot happening up here on dairy.
Welcome.
No, thank you. I'm not a dairy farmer. I make wine and hard cider, and we have very strict labeling laws. So if it's apple wine, you know it's apple wine. If it's a grape wine, you know it's grape wine. How has these plant-based products that are being marketed under the label milk that obviously are not milk, how has that affected the dairy industry?
So this would be soy milk and almond milk that,
Yes.
that are called
Yes.
that, but really are just juice from those.
I'm not even sure if I call it juice. But the issue is that it has eroded the sales of beverage fluid milk. And that's what we talked about from the beginning. Some of it's coming back with whole milk now. But generally over time, we've lost 1 to 2% of our milk sales steadily every year for the last 20 years. And that's been a big blow to farmers, particularly in the Northeast where we have huge population bases.
So is there a push to get them so they can no longer call it almond milk or
Well,
soy
there
milk?
is a push to do that, plus farmers are putting more money into promotion and other things to make sure consumers are aware of that. Almond milk, for example, my understanding is it only has a few almonds in it and it has no milk. And so we're letting consumers know about that and trying to get our market share back.
We heard Assemblyman Jones talk about quotas, and that's always brought up when you talk about milk prices and trying to fix things. Farmers obviously don't like talking about quotas. May it get to the point someday where you have to consider quotas?
Problem is that there isn't widespread support among farmers to do that. Plus, quotas within small geographic areas, even in a state like New York or the Northeast, wouldn't work because there are other farmers nearby that would be happy to bring their milk in. You need a national program to make it work, and then you have to deal with exports and imports as well. It's a very difficult program these days to implement. We tried 20, 30 years ago, but like I said, farmers didn't agree and legislators were not supportive. I don't think we have that level of support today either.
You hear some people say, why not go organic? Organic farmers get about twice the price for their milk, but that's easier said than done, converting a dairy operation to organic.
If they're getting double, their inputs are double too. I mean, the organic grain is expensive. And then the other trick of that is finding markets. Markets are very tight. I mean, you see these stories here and there about farms losing their marketplace, and that's one of the things that if you're a member of Agri-Mark, or I'm sure there's some DFA members up here, which used to be Dairy Lee, Agri-Mark and DFA have taken care of their members and guaranteeing a market for them. But if you're not in one of those cooperatives, you're not. Some people are right now. Dean Foods is dropping some farms throughout the country, and I don't know who would even take their milk because Upstate Farms in Western New York, which is a great cooperative, has been closed membership for at least 5-6 years. Agri-Mark's been closed membership for 2, 3, 4 years because we can only Agri-Mark can only market what they can market. And so if you want to go organic, make sure you know you have a group of people that you can count on. And then on top of that, the cost, I'm fine. If anybody wants to do organic, that's fine, but it's not a panacea.
Are a number of farmers losing their markets? And are they really left in?
Particularly those that ship to non-cooperative buyers of milk. They decide that they don't need the milk. They certainly don't want to balance extra milk. But cooperatives we make a commitment to our members. So even if we have to share losses, we market that milk. We just don't add new members on because that would be sharing more losses. So there are some markets. Basically, I think we've reached almost that point in the Northeast where most people have their markets because they've already had an opportunity to lose them and they've been able to get some markets. But on the organic side, for example, there's a surplus of organic milk. Those farmers are losing their markets and they can't find any markets. That's a real problem.
We heard about the yogurt boom a few years ago. Chobani opening the plant in New Berlin near Oneonta, Fayette in Johnstown. And the word was, bring all the milk. We're going to take all the milk we can possibly get. They use 4 times the amount of milk to make the Greek-style yogurt. Has that leveled out? Has that turned out to be the great promise that many people thought it was going to be?
So I think Greek yogurt's great. I think we have a governor who played it up more than it needed to be. Chobani is a great partner for us, but they built a plant in Idaho, so they're not getting all of their production out of New York anymore. So their needs for milk are greatly diminished. It's a great product because moms are finding room in their diets and their kids' diets for yogurt, so that's a good thing. Is it the panacea that some politicians tried to make it? No, but it was already a good thing, so some people said, oh, this is a great thing. So it's hard because a lot of dairy farmers get frustrated, say, oh, whatever happened to Greek yogurt? Greek yogurt is still a good thing, but it was never going to be a panacea.
Bob, does Agri-Mark deliver to those 2 plants? Does it supply those plants?
We do. We have in the past. The issue has been that actually the sale of Greek yogurt has peaked. It's still very high, okay? But some yogurts are still expanding. Cabot makes a Greek-style yogurt that's had continued growing sales because we can have a pricing point that's more economical for many consumers. And so it continues to grow, but not to the extent it has in the past. And it's not taking a whole lot more milk right now. So.
And we're joined now by Joe Giroux, a longtime dairy farmer here in Clinton County, former Clinton County Treasurer. Joe, nice to see you. Welcome.
Same here.
You obviously have been a dairy farmer
50 years.
50 years and have seen milk prices go up and down. And
yep. I've
this
had
is
days
hard, though.
that haven't been as good as others. And this part here I guess what I really came to the mic for was that those of you who know me and who've been around here, we know we live in a little different region here, the North Country. We're a little far away from markets. We're not in the Midwest where the grain and the soybeans and the hay is at their doorsteps. We have to pay trucking to get our products here, and it costs us a little bit more than everybody else. And we have worked very hard in this community by getting tile drainage in our fields and stuff so that we can try to compete with the other farmers in the other regions of the state. Even in the state of New York, we're a long ways away, or a long ways removed from our market. We're very lucky to have Agri-Mark in Cabot to do business with us so that we can have a market for our milk. But we got to remember, we're very far removed from the markets and what's happening to us, and also the price of stuff, of machinery, fuel. 40 years ago, or 20 years ago, you brought fuel maybe for $1.25 a gallon. In a while, it was $4 a gallon. You bought machinery, parts that are, it's unbelievable today. If you go get a tractor repaired and you drive in the back part of the dealership, and that's a thing among us farmers, it's not a thing among the community, it'll cost you a couple $1,000s just to go in and out of there. It's unbelievable. A barrel of oil is that we use to change motor oils is $700, $800, $900. It used to be $300, $400. So everything is really blown out of proportion. So everything that you do has a trickle effect on how you're about to stay in business. And we have to be very concerned about that. And our concern, I think, as us, and why we are talking here today as a group, is because we are removed somewhat from the market. We do have more costs. It's an awful thing when you have to come here and talk to a group of people about how you have to control your way of life. That's a pretty sad commentary, especially when we are probably, and I've always bragged about this, the largest economic driver we are in Clinton County is probably agriculture. Gary may say tourism, but we're about on the same page there. And we have to worry about that for our community when it's the largest economic driver. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. A new documentary looks at the plight of dairy farms and farm families struggling to survive. The local food movement has really taken off in some communities here in the Adirondacks and northern New York, where new young farmers and their startups are getting people interested in eating locally grown food and artisan cheese. But the movement seems to have overlooked many other farms, like the small family-owned dairy farms that have been producing dairy products for generations. And despite the push to buy and support local food, the documentary Forgotten Farms shows how many of these smaller family-owned dairy farms across upstate New York and New England are truly struggling.
We've seen a lot of changes to agriculture in New England over the past 40 years. In some communities, the local food movement is thriving. Farm to table, farmers markets, and CSAs, the movement grows stronger every year.
And it's important that we support local food production. But our enthusiasm for the movement obscures the fact that much of New England's agriculture is under threat.
There's another farmer who is left out of the local food celebration. New England has lost over 10,000 dairy farms in the past 50 years. 2,000 dairy farms are left, and they still produce almost all the milk consumed in the 6 New England states.
And we'll be broadcasting the documentary Forgotten Farms coming up in just 2 weeks on Monday, April 2nd at 9 p.m. and then again on Saturday, April 7th at 7 p.m. here on Mountain Lake PBS. I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank our audience, and thank you for watching at home. We appreciate you tuning in tonight. You can find more stories about how this is impacting dairy farms on our website at mountainlake.org. That's going to do it for now. Just a reminder, you can watch the film Forgotten Farms. That's coming up on April 2nd at 9 p.m. right here on Mountain Lake PBS. That is Mountain Lake Journal for this week. For all of us here at Mountain Lake PBS, I'm Tom Hellick. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Mountain Lake Journal on Mountain Lake PBS is made possible in part by
Northern Insuring, guiding your way for 85 years with offices in Plattsburgh, Whitehall, and Messina, providing personal insurance, business insurance, and life and employee benefit services.
Northfind Utilities creates employment and training opportunities for North Country residents with projects that build community and social infrastructure. We're family-focused and education-oriented. Power is our business and pride is our choice.
Knight Automotive, featuring a full selection of the entire Buick lineup in stock, and our world-class rated General Motors technician, Terry Relation, with 40 years of experience. Knight Automotive, Route 3, Plattsburgh.